Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fearless Now. And today's topic, we're going to try to do something a little bit different today. But today's topic is the age of awareness. And it's sort of an open ended, very broad conversation that we wanted to have. But one of the reasons why we kind of named it Age of Awareness is because we wanted to start conversations that provide creative, innovative, and sustainable changes to the way we learn. And what I kind of think about, that particular topic is just sort of our journey to personal development and how early can you start? Is it too early to start it as a teenager? Mike and I believe that it's never too early when you're on the path to personal development and personal growth. Um, and when we were formulating sort of the concepts behind our fearless platform, one of the things that we kind of talked about was coaching, and mentorship and other things that we can do for teenagers in addition to the content that we're providing when it comes to sort of personal growth. And I'll stop by I'll start by sharing sort of one analogy, which is every athlete has a coach. And why do they have coaches? They are able to kind of figure out their blind spots, get better every day. Uh, and then, when you're out of athletics, there's no other sort of coach for life and real life skills until you kind of fast forward to the corporate world. And, as an executive, you end up adopting, hopefully, a business coach and a leadership coach and do all of these assessments and things like that. So, kind of taking the story back to teenagers, they're in sports potentially, and they're kind of getting used to this concept of coaching and personal development and growth. And where do they start on their journey? So Mike, would love to hear kind of your journey. You were able to start a little bit before I did, so I think that was amazing.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like I've been trying to think about like when is it that I started and what drove it. Maybe before I share my personal story and how I got started. Um, what I wanted to chat through is that it's amazing to me. And then when Deepa and I decided to start Fearless Plus, it's amazing that there are so many things that are taught in high school and middle school about history, about math, about geometry. But psychology is not one of those things that is taught because
Mhm.
everything about awareness is rooted in psychology. And we've been studying, like scientists, psychologists have been studying how humans work for now 200 plus years,
Mhm.
which was also an interesting discovery. I did not realize that for some reason, psychology and philosophy to me were a bit closer in how long we've been studying this. I think it was late 1800s that psychology as a science was established. And that is one of the reasons why we at Fearless, the very first thing that we teach our participants is the basics of psychology. So I'll just quickly go through the topics and why we chose them.
Mhm.
So we don't really, for teenagers, we don't call it psychology because it's a bit academic. We call it know yourself and others. The way we think about it is that it's the language of how you operate, right? If you were to compare, I'm a software developer at heart. So if I were to compare myself to a computer, psychology is how I operate. And then it's also the language that I operate with others, right? So the technology people will appreciate that's the API that allows us to communicate with other humans. So understanding personalities, understanding where thoughts and emotions are coming from, how to manage the emotions, what are some of the success factors in how you communicate, how much of communication is nonverbal, right? Like there are words that are coming out of my mouth, but a lot of it, the way that it's perceived is the emotions that you see on my face, the articulation. And then I was very happy that we prioritized the topic of self-awareness. And what we taught people is that while many people think they're self-aware, it's a very small percentage of people that actually is.
Mhm.
And then coming back to that age of awareness, we're teaching law of attraction. And now I'll come back to my personal story, because to me, like, it just shows the benefit of being open-minded. So came to America at 16, pretty good at math, became a software developer. And I very much remember thinking about people that take philosophy and psychology majors, and I just, between not understanding and making fun, I was somewhere in between. Like, why would you take this versus electrical engineering, software development, accounting? And then very quickly, as I started working with people, and as I was in a relationship with friends and my future wife, I very quickly started understanding the benefit of psychology. I was fortunate to have a business coach, so I'm very grateful to the business owners of the business that I started working in, that they saw the potential, and then they assigned a business coach to me. So to me, that was the start of me just being very interested and curious about becoming better.
Yeah. Well, funny that there was there was something that I saw recently, particularly about self-awareness, and it was this guru from India. I forget. I think he just kind of goes by guru. I'm not sure. But interestingly, he said, a human, their nose is right above their mouth. And if you have bad breath, your nose is the closest thing possible to your mouth. And you will be unaware of how bad your breath is, but the entire room will be aware of it. So think about, that level of self-awareness to kind of read the room and know that that is your problem. But sometimes knowing that, your nose is right above your mouth and you think you know it all, but you don't, right? And so I thought that was a really interesting analogy around self-awareness. Mike was at my house not that long ago, and my husband and I were having sort of a tiff on how we communicate with one another. And I'm a huge, obviously believer in understanding and assessing yourself and what type of personality you are. And because you know who you are and you know who your audience is, that is how you can kind of become chameleon like and communicate with to your audience, right? Oftentimes people are like, I am who I am, and this is what makes me unique, and I'm going to communicate to everybody the same way. And sometimes that doesn't always work. And so, a lot of things that I talk about in my sort of executive leadership coaching, wearing that hat, I always talk about being a chameleon leader, because you don't want to be that dictator leader and kind of saying, this is how I am, and people have to conform to me. I think, true leadership is being able to understand your audience and be a chameleon and know them. And so bringing it back to sort of my husband and I and how we were communicating, my husband is very sort of black and white operational, and I'm very big picture, and I don't like a lot of instructions, right? And so he was trying for me to accomplish something. And Mike so eloquently asked my husband, how did you say it to Deepali? Like, what outcome did you want to achieve? And he just wasn't communicating in the right way. And so, for Mike to recognize that, and my husband to kind of, become self-aware, and then change his communication method with me. And I think that's part of it, right? Like, teenagers that can't relate to us sort of married folks, it's still, these relationships, right? You have parent-child relationships, you have teenage friend relationships, and every drama that's created in the teenage world is likely around miscommunication. So that's a big piece of it.
So it was not definitely. So everything I know is obviously came from either my parents or mentors or events or books that I read. So it just so happened that I came to your house after being in Arizona.
That's right.
Right. So I'm going back there tomorrow with my wife to Michael Burnoff. who is teaching his flavor of NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. And one of the biggest things that I took away from the first event that I attended, it's this phrase that communication is not about what you say, it's about the results that you get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a more expanded version of what I remind myself because of my very Eastern European technical background and nature. Is like I also remind myself and my family, specifically our kids, words matter, right? And this is what NLP teaches you. Like, I always fail at this. I am never good at this. Like, these words work with your subconscious in a way that you don't even consider. So that there are certain things that you should not say to yourself. There are certain things that you should not say to others. NLP is a certain version of a psychology, and it's that programming language of us as humans and how we interact with others. Like, you would not put diesel into a normal car, right? So why would you say something to your partner, business partner, your child, that will produce a negative reaction?
Yeah. No, and I think that you know, that piece of it is so important because that kind of leads to like, all of these things that have come about in terms of affirmations or incantations and things like that. When you pump yourself up, when you think about going to, an athletic event or a football game, they're all in a huddle, they're pumping each other up, the adrenaline is going, it's all positive. And so when they burst out of that huddle, they're energized, they are ready to go, and that positivity really sort of affects them in such a way that they want to meet their goal. Now when you think about meeting a very negative person, they kind of drain the energy out of you, and they affect you in a different way. So when you think about how you're communicating and what you're communicating, those are things that we kind of learn about. And I actually want to take a moment to really say that, you know, fearless, we're developing this, and we have developed, content and how we are going to be teaching kids in this way. But, I really have to take a moment to say, I'm so proud of us sort of recognizing that we're also on a personal growth journey. Whether it's Mike or myself or all the advisors that are involved, but this has been a sort of labor of love and curation of expertise. And we're trying to kind of bottle that up between sort of the 30,000 leader interviews that I've done and Mike's experience as an entrepreneur and leading hundreds of people, and everything that he's experienced in his personal journey and growth ventures. We're trying to bottle that up and really create this sort of content for the kids to learn, because my husband always tells me um, when he was working his summer job and he worked with a 70-year-old entrepreneur, he would always say, that 70-year-old would always tell my husband, I wish I could teach you 40 years of everything that I know into your 20-year self. Um, and that's hard to do, but at Fearless, we're trying to do that. And I know that Mike put up those sort of success fundamentals. And those success fundamentals are what we've sort of bottled up, and really have tried to, pinpoint some of these paths to success, and how we can help these teenagers in these various sort of fundamentals.
And the way that we think about this is that teenagers are very capable of learning whatever you put in front of them.
Yeah.
One of the words that I think about, and one of the concepts that I think about quite a bit, is the word saturation of information. Right? Saturation is the word. And I'll give you a very specific example. I've read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I probably read it when I was 23, 24, and it did not resonate. I had no idea asset liabilities. Like, I did not have the vocabulary and the background information. And I probably read it closer to 30. And at that time, we had our first kid. My parents were not doing health-wise. So, like, it also did not really, like, there was nothing actionable because I was one of those people that lived paycheck to paycheck just because of nobody else taught us any better. It's only when I got closer to 40, when I read it again, that I understood what is being communicated there. Because by that time, I've had enough conversations about real estate. I've had enough conversations about the importance of financial literacy. What's interesting is that at that time, my probably 10 or 11-year-old, he read the book within a course of 2 years, 3 times. And now when I ask him what is the difference between asset and liability, he can answer that. When I ask him, like, the house we live in, is that an asset or a liability? He correctly responds. So the earlier that we can introduce these concepts, the earlier these kids will get to saturation and be comfortable making certain moves. Because most of us, just like if you learn to play golf, like, you're not going to go play against very good players until you're pretty good at it. Yep. These concepts, that analogy of sports applies to many different things in life. What's interesting to us is that we spend a lot of time and energy and money on coaches, like sports coaches, but not enough on coaching ourselves and our kids on how to get successful.
And that was the last point that I'll make on that experience set, right? Like we believe in experiential learning. And just to take a page out of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours creates expertise. So to Mike's point, saturation, you have to have that. You have to put in those hours. You have to read those books maybe multiple times for saturation. And that's the reason. And so when we get these kids to get these experiences, and we get them to maybe take on these internships that we're going to be talking about really soon on our platform, these are the ways that once we sort of infuse those experiences combined with the content, it starts saturating them. It starts building those 10,000 hours. And by the time that they have it, they're comfortable. They're comfortable saying, it's an asset, or they're comfortable kind of saying, I can make that investment because I've learned so much about it, and I'm ready.
On that amazing note, we'll ask you for your guys' comments, input, what other topics you would like us to cover, and have a fearless day.
Thank you, everybody.